Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I've been running the GAP Storytelling Project with a group of adults here in this schoolroom for 2 months. I put up a notice asking for ghost stories because everybody has one, and some have actually seen or heard or felt ghostly presences. And I thought it would be a good hook, a way of getting people interested. Come in and tell a ghost story. And it was, in more ways than I could have imagined. One of the first things I asked the group was, what's the difference between a story with a ghost and a ghost story? A story with a ghost can be informative, it can be general, it can be folklore, heritage, it can be local background, history. You could be telling or retelling something that happened to you or that you heard had happened. A story with a ghost can have an eerie atmosphere and elements, but a ghost story has a purpose, and that purpose is to scare you. And using that simple metaphor, we looked at what writers and storytellers use in poems and plays and films and fiction to achieve their purpose. What structures, what tools do they use? We went from Greek drama through Shanachies, from Hollywood to poetry and stories, from Sophocles' Oedipus Rex to W.B. Yeats, from the First World War poet Wilfred Owen to the master of horror Edgar Allan Poe. And we sat and told our own stories, things we'd heard, things that had happened to us, and there was a lot. Strange noises, sounds, presences felt, lights, televisions, dishwashers going on and off, for no apparent reason. One of the group said, "There is no such thing as the paranormal, only things we can't explain." And very importantly, we looked at these. These are photocopies that I got from a friend of mine, a professor in the Department of Folklore, UCD. They're part of a ledger from the school's manuscript collection. In 1937 and 1938, the Department of Education and the Folklore Department went to over 100,000 children in 5,000 primary schools and collected folk tales, ghost stories, legends. They asked the children to ask their parents for stories. Then I imagine they had several practice attempts at handwriting before the teacher allowed them to be entered into the hallowed pages of these ledgers. You can see it was written in a child's pen and ink. Now this is from the school in Kylenearin, just near where we are. And round the edges you can just see the green of the hardback binding. You can see the lined pages, some of them yellow with age. And down the left-hand side here you can see the double line margins hand-drawn with a pen and ruler. Some of them not exactly perpendicular. And you can see the headings, folklore, and underneath that, ghost story, both in double inverted commas and both also doubly underlined with that same pen and ruler. And at the top of each story, you can see the names, the children who wrote them, their class, their addresses. Written by Martha Connell, 6th Standard, Curragh, Kylenearin National School, Gorey, County Wexford. Some of the people in the pages of this ledger may still be alive. Their descendants certainly are. And if these children got these stories from their parents, and they originally heard them from their parents, we're talking about stories that go back to the 1850s, the 1860s, and they have a resonance for people in this community. The place names, the family names, the landscapes, the superstition, the history. Stacia Murphy, Corcannon House. Near Cranford, in a place called Ballyowen, there lives a witch. Or another. One night, Master Larry heard a cry, and he went out to the pond. That was Lawrence Esmond. Many of the stories have to do with the Esmonds, and Ballinastraw House, which was the Georgian house and domain near Kylenearin where they lived. But there's no record of any stories having been collected from the children in this school here, Ballythomas, where we had our storytelling workshops. And no matter how much I looked in the archives, nothing. Except some of the group had spoken of seeing streaks of light, not fireflies now, but tiny points in the bedroom, swirling when you wake in the middle of the night. Sounds, wind, something brushing by you. They're all there, they said, all the time. and we live side by side with them. And so the group read poems, stories, searched for images, and we fed our imaginations and made pictures in our heads until one night. But then, as Pat Sullivan of the Mill said, the coming of electric light to the country did away with the ghosts. And so, in order to bring back the ghosts, and to bring back the time when the nights were so dark you couldn't see the nose in front of your face, the time a little stick on the road would seem as big as your arm, and a rabbit as big as a bay horse, and a stack of turf as big as a towering church in the city of Dublin, the time when every bush and its shadow hid a terrible shape. To bring back that time, and to bring back the ghosts, I now invite you, the audience, to close your eyes and to put on your masks. These are eye masks that you'll find in the back of your chairs. Members of the group here will assist you. We made some recordings as we talked and read aloud in the group. Voice recordings. Now, the quality isn't great. There's an echo, there's interference, doors bang, and, well, the whole thing was very informal. But now, if everyone is suitably masked up, sit back, relax, keep your eyes closed, and listen while we play some of these recordings that we made in the course of the workshop sessions.
When the electricity used to go, when I was a chap, the electricity would go a couple of times a year. And so we'd stoke up the fire, we'd get out the big black kettle, that'd be put on the fire to make tea. We had one of those big long extendable forks. The batch loaf would be brought out, and we'd make toast against the fire. And then my father would sit by the fire with a few chairs. We'd open the front door to the main street, and people would wander in. And then us, the chaps, would sit at the back of the room as the old folk would sit drinking tea up by the fire and telling ghost stories and yarns. And there's a specific gravestone in the Church of Ireland graveyard that when the clouds moved across the moon, you could see a man rising from the grave, which would send us straight to bed under the covers.
There was a woman that used to go walking every night, and one night she was out walking and she was passing by her friend's house, and she decided she would call in. But as she walked closer, she noticed there was a white hearse outside. So she decided she wouldn't call because she realised the woman had a visitor. So she went on by. Some days later, she was talking to the woman and she said to her, I didn't like calling in the other night because as I was passing by, I noticed that there was a white horse in your garden and you had a visitor. The woman replied, no, she said, I had no visitor. There was no white horse in my garden. Sometime shortly after this, she had got word that her son had been killed while riding a white horse, and this was during the First World War. Men marched asleep. Many had lost their boots, but limped on, bloodshot. All went lame, all blind, drunk with fatigue, deaf to the hoots of gas shells dropping softly behind. Gas! Gas! Quick, boys! An ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time. But someone still was yelling out and stumbling and floundering like a man in fire or lime. Dim through misty panes and thick green light, as under a green sea, I saw him drowning. In all my dreams before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning.
Before my helpless sight,
He plunges at me,
guttering, choking, drowning.
choking, drowning.
In all my dreams before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. Ghost Story, written by Martha Connell, 6th Standard, Kylenair National School, Curra, Gorey, County Wexford. Many ghost stories are connected with Ballinasstraw House, the home of the late Sir Thomas Esmond. Long ago, a man was hanged from the top of the hall door, and when he was dying, he said, "Every night throughout the year. My spirit will be always hanging here. A cross was marked into the hall door in memory of this man. This happened when the old family lived there, and this spirit is supposed to be seen after 1 o'clock each night. Some nights a mourning carriage leaves Ballinasstraw and goes up Limbrick, which is in the parish of Kylenairn. In this place are the ruins of an old castle. On other nights, a hearse with shining knobs and large high shining crosses on top, with a brass coffin inside, goes to the ruins of the old castle, and from that to the vault.
Yeah, I was walking Lampin one night on the Hollyford Road, and I went into a field, and the field was open and the grass was all cut, and I put the light around the whole field, and there was nothing there, and there was no horses, no sheep, no cows, no nothing, and I put the light across the field again, and then there was nothing like, and as soon as I turned off the light, all I could hear was right behind me, brum, 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 a horse running behind me, and I got out on the road and I cried. And I ran up along the road, nearly back into Gorey, near the waterworks in Gorey. Like that was maybe 3 miles. I ran, there was 2 other fellas with me. And that came all the way up through the gardens, through fields, and on up through more gardens. And they stopped on the bad bends going into Gorey at the waterworks. And I did not mess with it. That was the fright of my life. And I'm mad into me lamping and that. And I would not go lamping no more. That is genuine, 1,000,000%.
But then one night while we were here in this room in the school at a session, we heard a strange noise. Well, I thought it was the door, which we left open for latecomers, the outside door. And sometimes it swung open, even on a very light breeze. And sometimes the sun, going down over towards Tinnahealy, caught the glass on the door as it swung, and it threw the shaft of light up the walls. Well, we'd wait and we'd hold our breath and we'd listen, and then a footstep, somebody coming in late. But this night we listened, there was nothing. There was no wind, and just a door swinging and the light moving up the wall, and then nothing except I made a decision, and I called my friend in the folklore department in UCD who had given us the ledgers. I told her what had happened, and she suggested a colleague of hers who had done extensive research into this kind of thing, and a week later he came down and spoke to us, Professor M.J. Crow.
It is truly remarkable. The Esmonds, to whom many of the stories in this ledger refer, originally came from Eastmount in Pembrokeshire in Wales. Over time, Eastmount became Esmond and then Esmond. They came to Ireland with the first forces of Strongbow. Geoffrey de Esmond of Huntingdon was one of the 30 knights who accompanied Fitzstephen, who landed at Bannow in 1619. They built the beautiful Johnstown Castle and, of course, the house at Ballinasstraw, which is associated with many tales of hangings, of drownings, of Lawrence Esmond with pig's ears, and of an underground tunnel from Ballinasstraw to Limbrick Castle, said to be built to ferry the dead to Limbrick Castle, and then by morning coach after midnight to the vault in the graveyard at Kylenairn. But Eastmount in Wales, it is a beautiful spot, and as I came from Dublin this afternoon, I could not help but be struck by the remarkable resemblance that this area has to it. It is the mirror image of the landscape in South Wales, which has Eastmount and, naturally, its opposite, Westmount, and in between, the gap, Wilk Munad, the mountain gap. And gap, as you know, has many, many meanings. A break or hole in an object, or between two objects, an opening, an aperture, a space, a breach, an interstice, a perforation, a fracture, a fissure, a cleft, divide, a discontinuity, as in, there are many gaps in our understanding. Artists bridge these gaps with metaphors, from the Greek, metaphor, to carry over. Metaphors carry us from the world of simple words and transport us to the other world, the world of imagination. And certainly, there is a gap in the records here, in the National Schools collection here, in Ballythomas National School. No stories were collected, or no trace has been found heretofore. The gap at the gap, so to speak. And on preliminary evidence from what you've told me and from listening to your recordings, and in particular what happened that night, it would appear that you have stumbled upon a ghost pool, a phenomenon simplistically referred to by some as a portal. Perhaps the children here in Ballythomas did write stories. Perhaps they have been lost or mislaid, and this child was trying to protest or bemoan, or perhaps show you where to look. Or, on the other hand, perhaps the energy created by the storytelling group was so great that it conjured just such an appearance. Play back that tape. Play back what you recorded that night.
Oh my God. God. Yes. Yes. What was that?
The door just opened and closed.
Look at the way she's dressed.
She's got a pinafore smock.
She's going to the desk. She's writing on the paper.
But come here. This school wasn't included in the National Survey.
It was a little girl. I saw her too,
Look, I don't believe it.
but I felt it. It was like a breeze, a gentle breath. I felt it down the back of my neck, like something brushing past. Her feet were bare,
And her bare feet were wet.
her hair too, like it was raining. She wanted to dry herself by the fire.
Or she came in looking for something.
Why didn't you ask her?
Why didn't you?
It's too late now. She's gone.